All right, so let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. First of all, let me extend a very warm welcome to every one of you. Thank you so much for making the time to join us, taking the time to join us, given the exceptional circumstances that we're all currently facing. My name is David Dubois, and I'll be a co-host of this webinar. I'm a marketing professor with a background in marketing strategy. I spent the first part of my career at the Kellogg School of Management in the US. I've been at INSEAD for about 8 years, most of the time on the French campus. Right now I'm based in Singapore, so it's evening here, and increasingly spending a lot of time on our cloud campus. Just to give you a background, largest part of what I'm doing with companies in terms of teaching, research, and other activities revolves around how do people interact with digital technologies? How do they think, they feel, they behave differently on online versus online, offline platform? What I call the psychology of technology. I'm also doing a lot of things in the area of digital analytics. How do we increase or create novel customer value by creating, by leveraging this massive data around the world and making that data actionable? And more recently, but also perhaps more intensively, I have been increasingly interested in digital transformation, which is really how do you make that data actionable, which is a topic of today's conversation. So today, I'm delighted to welcome, together with my colleague, Jörg Nissing, Alain Bejani, who is the CEO of Majid Al Futtaim. We've worked with Alain and his extended team on a forthcoming case study. We've had a lot of fun, and I very much look forward to the conversation today that would shed light on some aspects of the case and beyond. Looking forward to the conversation with all of you. So now what I'm going to do is pause so I can give Jörg a little bit of time to tell you about him, introduce our guest, and give you some context for this webinar. Jörg, over to you.
Thanks a lot, David. Also a very warm welcome from my end. My name is Jörg. I'm a marketing professor here at INSEAD, also since 8 years. I'm co-directing the leading digital marketing strategy program with David, where we are also currently creating an online version, and I'm also co-directing the B2B marketing strategies program here at INSEAD. Before INSEAD, I spent quite some time in strategy consulting, but all my work, whether it was during my PhD, consulting, research, or teaching, was and still is at the intersection of digital transformation, digital strategy, customer centricity, and data analytics. I literally, last week, I published my new book, The Definitive Guide to B2B Digital Transformation. Feel free to download the first chapter of the book or many other related materials, or even get a copy yourself on our website, b2bdigitaltransformation.com. With this, I'm very delighted to introduce our honored guest, Alain Bejani. Alain is the Chief Executive Officer, as David said, of Majid Al Futtaim Holding, a Dubai-based lifestyle conglomerate operating in 16 countries. As a CEO, Alain led the fundamental shift of Majid Al Futtaim into a strategic architect and institutional shareholder for the group, and has been instrumental in transforming the business to be fit for purpose and sustainably serve its 560 million customers. Majid Al Futtaim is operating in many industries like retail, hospitality, and leisure. As you can see here on the slide, a quick overview of the brands in their portfolio. Under Alain's leadership, the company grew its revenues, profits, employment, and geographic footprint. He established the Majid Al Futtaim Leadership Institute for Developing Future Leaders. He also established the Majid Al Futtaim School of Analytics and Technology as a platform for leadership in analyzing customer insights. He launched the company Net Positive Strategy and invested in technologies that allows the voice of the customer to be heard and acted on a daily level. He has positioned Majid Al Futtaim for long-term growth and success while cementing its position as a leading privately owned conglomerate across the region with the vision, great moments for everyone, every day. Alain is also the co-chair of the World Economic Forum 2020 Stewardship Board for the Middle East and North Africa, with responsibility for shaping the regional agenda. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you today, Alain. Thanks a lot for taking the time to share your insights on MARF's customer-centric, digital, data-driven transformation. Just as a little intro that I wanted to give to the topic before we dive into the questions. Today, we are witnessing a profound shift in how customers use digital technologies to consume information, make informed buying decisions, and engage with companies. This shift has been accelerated by COVID-19. So the shift is easy to see. It's actually not that easy to do. Companies that have started their transformation early on are more resilient, but many organizations are pushed into their transformation, and business leaders are searching for pragmatic ways to profitably grow their business in today's disrupted world. From a business leader's perspective, reports of the latest data advance and the launch of every new technology misses the point. Business leaders want to know how to effectively apply data and the latest digital technologies that are most relevant to their customers, their industries, and the unique growth challenges they face. But CXOs also report that many of their digital transformation efforts fail. Of the 1,300 senior executives that Accenture interviewed for its digital transformation study in 2019, actually 78% failed to exceed their return on digital investments. In our research, we have identified 6 key reasons for this. And one is, as you can see here on the slide, creating outstanding customer experiences. And this is a question we have asked our audience in a pre-survey. And as you can see, also in our audience, only 11% are delivering outstanding customer experiences across the organization, while still over 20% have not literally a strategy at all, and another 27% just got started. Other reasons for failure are lack of upfront commitment and clear objectives, building a digital strategy that is disconnected from the rest, missing a data strategy across all functions, and the last one is the main reason for failure is that companies are taking a technology-first approach instead of prioritizing customers over technology. So with this, Alain, many organizations know about the reasons, but they are still struggling. I'm sure you have been discussing many of these reasons during MARF's transformation as well, which is of course still going on. And it will be very good to hear from you how you brought all these to life. But before we dive into this topic in detail, first of all, welcome again. Pleasure to have you. How are you doing? How are your close ones? How is your group currently doing during this crisis?
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very honored and proud to be with you in this conversation, and I am really looking forward to the questions that we're going to receive from the audience. So thank you for that. What I'd like to say is it has been, as we all know, these are unprecedented times, and it has been something that we are never ready. We never readied ourselves for this situation, although we've done a lot of extensive work in the past to make sure that we are fit for purpose in the future, that we have our business continuity plans in play and they are actually effective. But the reality is we were never ready or actually thought that we'll be in a situation similar to this one. I think this pandemic has taken the world by storm and has taken, of course, all of us by surprise. This being said, I think where it becomes actually quite interesting is when you are in a situation where you can actually realize how important were the preparations that you have done and how ready you are, despite the fact that you may not be really aware of how ready you are for this. I think Majid Al Fudaim in this regard was a fantastic candidate. I'm very proud and very happy of the efforts that my colleagues have shown, our fellow MAFers, in terms of resilience, grit, and also in terms of making sure that the world continues to function as importantly and as effectively and smoothly as possible. We've never really I would say, acknowledged or internalized the importance of our business until this pandemic hit, especially our grocery retail business, as well as, and that was primarily about empowering people, enabling people to stay at home and make sure that their world continue to function without them having to really worry about the basic necessities. So in the past, we've taken a lot of things for granted. And I think we have developed a global economy and the world that was primarily driven by, I would say, efficiency at the expense of resilience. I'm sure you've heard that many times, but this is something that's extremely real. We have all went for efficiencies and to make sure that given that most of what we consider the new world order, we've taken it for granted that it will always be the case. We've always considered that globalization will always be there, that actually supply chain will never be disrupted, that things will continue to happen, except in, I would say, primarily volatile security or geopolitical instability, but not in this type of situations. And we suddenly realized that this reality is there, and our business is actually vital as anything else. And our ability to be there online and to be able to fulfill the orders of our customers to keep their work going as smoothly as possible so they can stay in the comfort and safety of their homes, they can take care of what's actually even more essential and take that burden off their chest, I think was extremely important, empowering. And also we felt that we are part of keeping the world going. Now this has happened, and of course we are today in a different situation where we're more adapting and learning how to live with the virus and this reality for at least the coming 12 to 18 months. In the meantime, our digital transformation has never come in as handy and as important as we thought it is, because it allowed us to do so many things that we never thought possible. By one, continue to be relevant as an organization. Two, basically rise to the challenge of the times that you're going through and contribute to our communities and to our customers, and really come across as a real partner or lifetime partner to our customers, which in my opinion is extremely important. The strengths of brands is not only driven by the emotional bond that brands are able to extend and develop with their customers during good times, but actually what is left of that during bad times and how important, essential that is. And that goes from how reliable you are to how much you actually walk the talk during bad times, whether it's on people or it's on customer. And I think all of these things have been guiding us and our North Star in how we have tackled this, I would say, the survival mode during this pandemic, but also allowing the world around us to survive as well. And that goes from simply doing our job to food security, to make sure that the supply chain continue to function properly, to technology enabling a digital online presence and making sure that you are able to continue to be connected in a meaningful way, although we cannot be physically connected. Or simply, how do you move 50,000 people almost into working from home within a week in a seamless way where things continue to work, continue to function without any disruption? That's really thrilling and very exciting, as well as how do you shift your workforce? How do you redeploy your workforce where it's needed rather than basically putting people into harm's way, in my opinion, on the livelihood front. Our ability to shift, redeploy a lot of our cinema and leisure entertainment people, for example, move them into our fulfillment centers on the grocery retail with Carrefour, and so on. So all of these things, this agility, the organization coming together and living up to its values, to its leadership model, have been extremely inspiring.
Great. That's fantastic to hear how much you've been doing, and thanks for sharing also the complexity of how a company like yours need to tackle and embrace for the COVID-19. Now, one obvious question, we're going to try to dive in a little bit into what you did. The digital transformation that you initiated now about 5 years, if I remember correctly, seem to have helped a little bit. Obviously, what you shared with us is very complex, lots of things to do with customers, collaborators. But before we dive into really what you did specifically, what the digital transformation, role of data, how what are the infrastructure that you created, can you tell us a little bit why, what was the impetus for this? What was the start for the digital transformation in your group?
Look, I would say it's not really a digital transformation only. It's a transformation. I really do not think, and I think some of the questions that the poll, the survey that you have made, actually go along those lines. It is not possible to transform, in my opinion, part of an organization and leave the rest. So what we have done in 2015 is to embark in actually redefinition of how do we continue to be relevant in the coming 25 years. One aspect of it is digital transformation, but a digital transformation without actually a cultural transformation is not possible, because this is really about changing the mindset into the organization. And here we're not talking about organizations that are pure play digital organization that need to evolve, which is currently the case, for example, with the FANGs and others. We're talking about a brick and mortar organization that has been doing very well, that does not have a real burning platform, and gets to the point where success is there and you're doing well, etc. And then it's difficult to tell people, you know what, it ain't broken, but we're going to fix it. So it is your ability to actually create a burning platform that is really primarily about the relevance in the coming 25 years or in the future, as opposed to people being in a mood where if we don't do something different, we're going to lose our jobs. We are in a dire situation, and we absolutely have to do something different, because human beings that we all are do not like change, and change is by nature something that we always consider as alien, and we wonder we are all in favor of change when it does not include us. So we move when there is a need to move, when there is the survival instinct that actually overtakes us. We absolutely need to do something. That's not always the case when you are doing well and you're fine. So it was very important to basically create the burning platform. And in a way, I became the burning platform, and my leadership team to say, look, guys, we're doing well. That's exactly the problem. It's because we are doing well that we have to start to do differently in order to continue to do well into the future. And this means, how do we reinvent ourselves? How do we make sure that we are clear on where we're taking the organization? And how do we make sure that this organization will continue to earn the confidence and have the right foresight to understand the trends that were in 2015, they then were slower than what it became in 2020 or 2019. So we went into that conversation and we said, okay, where do you want to be in 25 years and what does it mean for us? A lot of people consider that a bit of far-fetched. I mean, come on, 25 years, what are you talking about? But in reality, when you are a conglomerate with different businesses, different countries, and when you are in some businesses, your cycle is a 7 to 10 year cycle. So for example, shopping malls, although we have a much shorter cycle on, for example, grocery retail. So if you take the two bookends of our businesses, a 7 to 10 year cycle and a few months to a year cycle, any strategy that does not include, in terms of its foresight, 2 cycles is irrelevant. Because by the time you can change, it takes you 7 to 10 years to develop a shopping center. So you can't just get in and out of $1 billion investment or a $2 billion investment in the span of 2-3 years. It takes a longer time. So this is why the 25 year as an anchor was very important. And then ask ourselves the questions: do we want to continue to be in the businesses that we are? Are we in the right geographies? What should we do differently, etc. And we've done that, and we've done a lot of introspection internally. We answered the questions, which actually is the most important thing, answering the real questions. Are we in the right businesses? Should we continue to be that? And if so, how? And we came to the conclusion that what defines us going forward is the fact that we are a lifestyle conglomerate. We're not a shopping mall company. We are not a grocery retail company. We're not a cinema company. We're not a hotels company, or a residential development company, or a consumer finance company. What we actually do, we have the customer at the center, and we have an ecosystem of services and experiences around that customer. So we want to continue to be a lifestyle company, conglomerate. And then we thought, are we in the right region? Now, when you think about the coming 25 years, the Middle East, the MENA region, will be the second most growing region globally after Southeast Asia. So yes, there is a lot of potential, but of course there's a lot of risks as well. We're part of the fabric of this organization, region. We understand the 70 markets that you operate in very well, and others. So we're growing consecutively there. And we think that in order to achieve what we need to achieve, we need to do two things. One is to deliver a distinctive customer experience that's industry with regard, when you compare it to our industry, that's actually benchmarkable, and it's a benchmarking. It redefines what it looks like for shopping malls, for cinemas, for grocery retail, etc., etc. And in order to do that, we need to have talent of global stature. Whether it is our ability to attract global talent, like the people that are today listening to us and watching us, or to develop regional talent of global stature, and Majd Al Futtaim being a platform for them. So if you're in the region and you want to work here, you actually, in your resume, in your experience, in what you have done, when you go later to South Korea, or you go to the US, or you go to any global leaders, they would recognize the organization that you have been working with, and they know what it stands for. And that can only happen if it's really underwritten by proper technology and a digital transformation and the digital reality that can make those things happen. So this has been the motivation in order to drive the digital and make sure that this digital transformation is actually has a reason, has a purpose. It's not because now, you know, digital is nice and we want to do that. It's not a feel-good thing. It's actually a mean to an end. And that end comes back to the purpose of the organization and the purpose of each and every one of us. On the other side, if we do not have the right leadership capabilities, it will be very difficult for us to succeed in any transformation. So the first thing that we have done as Majd Al Futtaim is that we immediately realized that we have to support our people in their leadership development. And the reason is the following. We were in 2015 onward going into very fundamental changes, what I call tectonic shifts. And those shifts at the time were a fundamental tectonic shift moving from goods and services to experience. So there was a big change, and people were and continue to overspend in percentage on experience than on goods and services. There was a retrenchment of spending on goods and services versus experience. People were spending 4 times more in percentage on experience, on travel, on going out, on being together, on cultural products, as opposed to before compared to goods and services. And there was another shift that was happening at the same time, which is the technology revolution and digital coming into the workplace, into the relationship between the brand and its customers, into our daily life. That was also another revolution. So these two things were happening at the same time, like tectonic shifts happening. We were not always feeling them because they happen slowly but surely. And we always feel that it will happen to someone else, but not to us. So it was very important that we realized that. And the fact that our competition was changing, our competitive landscape was changing. So traditionally, until 2015 or so, our competitors were the people or the guys across the street. So let's say in our mall business in Dubai, so the primary competitor to Mall of the Emirates was the Dubai Mall, or you know, another cinema brand or whatever. But the reality is, suddenly, in the span of 3 years, that competition shifted from the guy across the street that you see, that you understand, that you know, that you can deal with, that you have been trained as an executive or as a professional to deal with, to actually someone that you've never seen, that you've never met, and that actually maybe not in your region. So we shifted from local competitors to global competitors. And then we realized there was something else that was happening there. So Amazon have replaced our competitor, for example, or others, or Airbnb, or Netflix, etc. And suddenly we are leading a business that needs to be competitive and relevant in the context of a global best-in-class competitor with higher means, higher firepower, more talent and capabilities, etc. But what we realized very nearly thereafter is that the real disruptor is not Amazon or the Netflix or the Airbnbs of the world or the Uber or the whatever. The real disruptor is the customer. I think that was a very important realization, that my issue is not who is trying to do something somewhere. My issue is the customer. The customer kind of, you know, we got liberated from the servitude that was about, we had to basically satisfy ourselves with what we have available to us in a certain market. We went from a captive audience to a free global audience where we could do, buy, expect, okay, whatever we see on our fingertips and that we think is very relevant. And at the same time, those global competitors were shaping the expectation of our customers, although they may not be serving them. I always give this example of the Uber app. And now I think Uber has been a great disruptor in so many ways, but actually Uber enabled the customer to disrupt industries. So we talked about the Uberization of app and other things and the standards that they brought, the famous three-step order. So the first victim of this new seamless approach that Uber brought is actually not transportation. It was the online banking. You know, Uber was not available, for example, in the Middle East, but people were exposed to that because the product is available to them. And they suddenly shifted on their online banking that was very cumbersome. And they expect a three-step for any online banking transaction. So Uber was not in banking. Uber was not a competitor of global banks or local banks, but actually it disrupted their relationship with their customers because the customer saw something different and now they expect it everywhere. And if you didn't have the technological and digital capabilities to actually overtake that and do much better, you would have become simply irrelevant because our patience and our tolerance to what does not look like or feel good enough has actually changed fundamentally post 2015. And this is what has been driving all of these changes. And we felt that it was important in a context that was so disruptive to allow people the ability to feel safe. And the only way for us to feel safe is to support them in their leadership development. You cannot develop human beings. What you can do is you can give them the opportunity to develop themselves. And then it's up to us if we want to pick it up or not. You can't force me to become a better leader or a more accomplished leader. You can give me the opportunity. And we always thought at Majd Al Futtaim that we have actually a duty, an obligation to our MAFers to allow them the opportunity to progress. And this is why we decided to invest in the Leadership Institute. And at the beginning, we were a bit criticized. People saying, why are you investing in this thing? People don't sign to stay with you. It's costing you money, etc. Which is true. But in reality, it would have cost us much more had we not done that. And it is really a partnership. So how do we provide our people the opportunity to develop, for them not to feel irrelevant, and to really understand that the key going forward is their ability to lead themselves, to open up, not to feel threatened by the changes that are happening globally around them, the change in the digital and as well as in the competitive landscape, and understand that the value that they bring is more a value, the value is measured by their ability to adapt, to learn something new, than actually to be masterful in something of the past. So this is why we went into the Leadership Institute and we made it mandatory to all our people to actually go through it. And then we needed to support them in this new world. And this is why we launched the School of Analytics and Technology, as well as the School of Great Moments for Customer Experience, in order to demystify technology and give our people the support that they need to actually progress. So once you unlock, you unfreeze their potential by sharpening their leadership capabilities and then not feeling that they are threatened by the progress that's happening around them. They're not irrelevant. And if they don't know something, it's actually a stigma, while turning it into, in reality, an opportunity to develop by supporting them on the actual content development.
And maybe linked to this point, Alain, this fantastic insights here. When I'm sharing the key two pillars that were driving MAF's transformation, interesting to your earlier point, I'm not a fan of the term digital strategy or digital transformation. It should be transformation in a digital world. And I mean, same here on your slide, there is no digital, right? There is no data. It's really coming from this customer-centric perspective. So as you know, today is also about data, and we will dive into this. So when came that into place? I mean, when did you realize, okay, to make this happen, we heavily have to rely on customer data?
So the only reason why we went into this, I mean, the data and analytics, is to enable our people. Again, it all revolves around two things. One is the customer, and two is the MAFer. So in order to allow to support our people in becoming better executive and leading their businesses better, we needed to give them the ability to shift from what I call educated gut feeling that have been running the world, okay, to actually fact-based decision making. So in the past, technology was not as ubiquitous and as available and as effective. And the visualization was not as good as it is today. So it was important for us to do two things. One is ready ourselves to the future. To ready ourselves to the future, we need to understand our business, understand our customer, understand our market. To do that, we needed to get much better on the understanding side, the insights that we can derive from our what we are doing. And for that, we needed data, and we need to be able to analyze that data and derive insights and make sure that those insights get in front of your eyes at the right time within the decision-making process. Because if you get the data or the insight too late or too early, it's irrelevant at times. So that's also extremely important. So we shifted that by actually working on how on getting the data, working on the integrity of the data, making sure that this data is there. How do we deal with the data? How do we store it? How do we access it? How do we govern it? And so on. And then how do we make it relevant? How is it relevant to our business through the analytics capabilities that we have developed? And then from that, becoming more a fact-based company, decision-making based. So we can actually make the right decision at the right time and discover things about ourselves that we did not know before. So this is all the result, if you want, of a mindset. And that mindset is the following. We feeling blessed that we live at times where technology is so advanced and so available that actually our ability to understand what we do, understand ourselves better is finally here. And digital allow us to do things that we could have never done before. How can we change our approach to business from a blanket approach to the business to a targeted, individualized approach to business? I've always been a very big believer in the customer relationship and the strengths of the bond that you create with your customer. And to do that, you need to know the customers individually. So if you are a vegetarian, for example, and I am in grocery retail, my supply chain today gives me an opportunity to have a better price, for example, on meat. Why am I going to push meat promotions on you while you are a vegetarian? If you love Bollywood movies, why am I as a cinema? How will you feel? How will you feel as a customer of a cinema operator? Okay, you love Bollywood movies, for example. Okay, and I continue to push at you Hollywood movies. How better would you feel towards the brand if the brand takes into account your specificity, acknowledges you as a customer, and comes to you with a tailored proposition that suits you, that might be different from what your friend will see? Of course, you're going to feel better, but that will also drive better business. So finally, technology allows us to do that. We have hundreds of millions of customers. It was impossible for us to be able to get to that level of understanding of our customer. And now technology and digital allow us to do that. So it is actually a blessing, because a lot of business leaders and companies have been talking about being disrupted or disrupting others. You don't disrupt others. You disrupt your relationship with your customer to make it much better. And we finally have the tools and the capabilities to do that. As I often mention it to my internal audience and external audience, this is really back to the future. 70, 80 years ago, even 50 years ago or so, people used to know their clients by name. If you go to any city in the world, you go to the grocer or to the supermarket or to wherever, people used to know their customers by name. They know their preferences. They know what they like. They know what they dislike. They know when are their birthdays. There was a personal relationship that was very, very strong. With time, that evolved, and we moved from being clients to becoming consumers. And afterwards, we have a field that has been developing in the past 10, 15 years to become clients again, to be individually acknowledged and recognized, because it's a much more fulfilling experience. In order to get there, we need to have technology. We need to understand the data and have the right level of analytics so we can engage with our customers, but also engage with our people internally and enable ourselves to continue to be relevant in the future.
So this is a great insights, Alain. Thank you so much for sharing. I think, in the data that Jörg presented, and something that will be very relevant to our audience as well, is very often data is siloed, right? And so when you think about, many companies that are trying to do what you did, they are having a hard time, and that is partly because data is siloed. People maybe don't want to share the data, or people, data is not fluid. And it seems like, from our conversation, what you just mentioned, with your team, there's a dialogue that you're able to instill within your organization about data, between leadership, the business units, not having almost only like a top-down approach, but also a bottom-up approach. Mm-hmm. And, it links back to what you said about people. Can you tell a little bit more about, the how of the data, right? So how do you make the data almost like a non-event, something very fluid that people use as a tool to learn, to get back to to use your words?
So it goes back to a very simple concept. And when we started this journey, one of the first obstacles that we faced, and I'm sure a lot of people would recognize similar situations. We have different businesses, okay, different executive teams that lead every business. And suddenly each and every one of those said, this is my data. I can't share my data because, it's about my customer. I have to keep it. I have to protect it. This is about me. And suddenly the sum could not be greater than the total couldn't be greater than some of the parts, because each one of the parts wanted their own data. But what they were not seeing is the fact they can understand their business better by accessing the whole data. So it was better for everyone to have access to everyone's data. So I made a simple executive decision. That was one of the few non-democratic decisions I made. I told them, look, guys, I fully respect what you're saying and what you're thinking. You're absolutely right. But at the end of the day, I'm your shareholder. Okay, I own your business. I own the chair you're sitting on. He said, yes. And then I own the data that you have. So all the data is owned by Holding. So all the data is owned by the group. And then every one of you has access to it. The way I own their cash flow, the way I own everything, I own the data as well. So this is not something that is specific to a business. But then once we did that, and once we put the data together, and once we start to develop use cases, that actually we could understand the customer behavior in a business by actually having better sight about what this customer is doing elsewhere, they suddenly understood what the importance of actually having the depth and breadth of data and their ability to understand their customer much better and their business much better. And we immediately moved from there. So it was a very clear decision. And it was also very clear the value add that this brings to all of the businesses. And this is not anymore, I mean, for the past 5 years, it's a conversation that we never have. Now, where things become sometimes a bit kind of, contentious, or there are conversation about them, is when you are discussing your data governance framework, when you're talking about how do you give people access to data, how do you create your data lake, your data warehouses, how do you pull the data, bring it back. But this is more about do we need the data to be live, or do we need the data to be by the end of the day or the second day or the week, depending on the business. So, but these are more, I would say, on the technicalities of it. The principle is very clear. Yeah. And I think it's very important in any transformation, especially in a technology or digital transformation, to go back to the basic principles. I think yourself at the beginning, or your colleague mentioned the fact that people adopt a technology approach or technical approach to transformation. And I agree, this is one of the common mistakes. Technology is at the service of humanity. It's our service, at the service of us as executives and human beings. So we have to go back to the fundamental basic principles and apply them to technology, and not the other way around. When you take a technical approach to it, you actually get lost. You lose the forest for the trees.
And maybe to this point, Alain, this is great. The bottom up, I mean, really having the skills, but also then the culture, the leadership style. Looking at the chat here, lots of the questions are related exactly to these 2 points. I mean, at one point you launched the Advanced Analytics Center of Excellence, which was critical for you to drive this forward, to have this well-oiled analytics practice. I mean, what skills did you recruit here? And also then again, from a leadership perspective, how did you create this sense of urgency for the other leaders in the organization that we have to do it?
Well, it's, I would say it is, again, technology and digital are a subset. They are not the main driver. You have, if you want to transform anything, you have to start by a cultural transformation. And that cultural transformation, how do we, what I discussed before, how do you creating the right burning platform and basically having a purpose. The transformation has to have a purpose. And if this purpose is clear and you're able to create the burning platform around it, people rally around it very simply. But when you do not work enough on really a fundamental transformation of your culture, that is actually an enabler, like the ambient liquid. You know, it's the enabler of the technology or digital or any other type of transformation. So once we have said, okay, this is what we need to do, and this is why we need to do it, and this is why it's very important, and this is the pace that we need to move at, and we've communicated very clearly. I think communication is a very, very important part of any transformation. People understand it, people get it, but people need to see you walking the talk on what you are talking about. And like in any organization, the crust on top of an organization, the C-suite are the people that are usually the most difficult to move. But your people understand it, they see it, even though they may not understand the intrinsics and the technicalities, they understand why you're going in that direction, because they are the ones that are customer facing, they are the ones that see the synergies, and they are the ones that have the least vested interest in it. So being able to articulate the case for change in a very, very clear and compelling manner, being able to communicate it across the board clearly, being able to show that this is not something we're doing it because it looks nice, but actually it is something we're doing that we're serious about, and you're willing to take the right, I mean, to put our money where our mouth is, but also to walk the talk on making the tough decisions. People naturally rally around. The other thing that I would say that's extremely important is you have to impose a pace. More importantly than any change is actually the pace. If you don't have the right pace, it's like water, flowing water. If the water doesn't flood, okay, nothing moves. Everything stays where it is, and the water, moves under the bridge. When you need to flood the organization at times, you need to have a current in order to make things to make things move, and in order to focus people's attention on what matters most. That's also extremely important. So these are, I would say, some of what we have noticed and what we have actually put into action in order to be able to drive this transformation without delay, but also being careful and thoughtful about it, but not wasting time.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. I think the audience will fully appreciate these insights. Just to, you mentioned something, particularly profound around, making sure that you have, the pace of change, and, it's, it's not there's no end to it. It's really a process rather than a mean. Something that when we worked on the case, particularly impressive was the extent to which you created a use case methodology, right? So we really getting into this test and learn mode, but really fully understanding and appreciating that in test and learn, there are two words. There's testing and there is a learning. And so I was just wondering whether you can spend a little bit of time, because it also links back to what you're saying earlier about who is our competitor. It's not Amazon, it's really the customer. And if we want to keep being the best, we want to learn. So, thinking about your company as a learning agent, it means also that you have a greater level of transparency. It means that you have to share the good news, but also the bad news. It means that there needs to be some fluency about the cases. So I just wanted to ask whether you could give a sense for the audience of the use case methodology, but also how you make it alive within the organization, as a tool for growth. rather than something that would be of less value?
Look, I mean, it's very simple. I would say it's very simple when you mean it. So sharing the transparency is extremely important. Sharing the good news and the bad news is extremely important. And when you are really transparent, sharing the bad news is so simple. When you are really putting what it takes, when you are really genuinely walking the talk, people understand it. It's amazing how understanding and how trusting people are when they see you meaning what you're saying and saying what you mean. It goes back to things that are very, very, very basic, what I call basic truth, universal truth. A lot of the people that you appreciate are not all successful people. But you appreciate them not because of what they do or how good they are, you appreciate them for who they are. And this is the same for organization. People appreciate the organization for who it is, what is it doing, if it is somebody, if it's doing something. But if it's not, people can see it as well. It's not about what you say, it's not about what you plaster on your walls, it's not about how good or bad you look, it is about who you actually are. And your ability to actually flesh that out is extremely important. And this is where transparency becomes a fantastic tool to actually rally people, okay, but also get the support that you need whenever you need that support. So in our case, the fact that we have put everything together, that for example on data, and we said, okay, we're going to start by, we don't know. We're not a technology company. We really, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, believe me, we were having typewriters almost. It's not even CPUs, typewriters. Point is, when you acknowledge that and you say, okay, it's a journey and we're on it together and we're going to push come hell or high water because we're going to get there. When you give it the right purpose, you articulate it clearly, people give you the benefit of the doubt and people walk the talk with you and they appreciate what you're actually doing. So one of the things is that, we don't know how to do this thing, but we're going to do it. We're going to put the means to do it. We're going to bring the right people to support us on this journey. And we're going to actually start to develop a core competency for the group, where we're going to bring people from across the group and develop this use case methodology, these squads, where we are actually, all of us are going to learn how do we go about it and get our people to understand and learn it. And then, okay, this is not something that you want to do centrally. Then we're going to bring that back. We're going to keep a center of excellence centrally, set standards, to continue to define what good looks like. But we want to empower you as businesses to be able to own your business fully and to be able to do that at your level in an exponential way. So this is how we went about it. And it has been a very meaningful exercise because it showed people, it showed people what it means and the impact it has. It's like tasting French fries. You can talk about French fries or chocolate until the cows come home, but when you taste it, you get it.
Yeah.
I can talk to you until tomorrow, but then you taste a French fries and your life changes. So one French fry makes a difference. It's about getting that there. And I think this is what we have tried to do.
Maybe linked to this point about use cases, Anna. We know from discussions with your teams, you started very small, the famous Carrefour use case, right? So what about today? Now you really implemented an approach where you literally do these use cases at scale, where departments, opcos are reaching out to the analytics practice. So how long did this take, and what are the use cases you are now working on? So for example, in my book, I talk about 3 fundamental shifts. One is digital selling, one is digital experience makeover, and one is digital proposition pivots. Are you now also moving into really more complex things when it comes to these use case approaches?
So of course, we're doing more, and we're doing better. And it is not really about the complexity as much as it is about the impact and the scale. One of the issues about the use cases is that, about use cases in general, is you try to go for the meaningful ones, but sometimes the most meaningful ones are the ones that actually you can't get to because you don't have the data, you don't have the methodology right, you don't have the ability to measure it, so you don't really know. One of the big use cases that actually that gave us really, really hard time, and we needed to really invent it because no one has ever done it, was the assortment. So we have a use case, we call it assortment in Carrefour, which is basically how do we actually determine, in simple terms, how do we determine what product and what brand, and how do we put them on the shelves? Simple way. You would think that's the most simple thing. And that's actually a very complex situation because there is a lot of interdependencies, and it could make a very big difference in terms of your performance, whether at category level or at a section level or store level. So one of the big problems we were having there is we needed the data, and we need enough data to really be able to compare. We needed to create what we call mirror stores and understand if we do this. Now we know what happens if we do it, but what happens if we don't do it, and how can we compare to see the difference? We need to create those mirror stores where we can that are really comparing apple to apple. But then the other thing, we needed to find a methodology to measure the impact, and that actually took us, I think, six to 9 months before we were able to get there, because no brick and mortar retailer globally has done it. Everyone was working on it, but very few had actually done it. So the complexity sometimes do not come from the fact that it is complex. It comes from the maturity of the organization or the industry and where things are, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, it has a big impact when you can actually roll out these use cases. So when you are a large business, anything that you do can only be impactful when you roll it out. And rolling it out means you have a higher number of people that need to be involved in it. These people need to be trained, need to understand, they need to be trained, need to be able to execute it in multiple geographies. In a similar way fundamentally, but very localized way, depending on the realities that they have on their own ground, their markets, even within the same city, different stores have different realities and so on. So this kind of complexity gets you to a point where you realize that this is not about it's not the technological problem. What actually can impact your ability to drive advancement and to drive effectiveness on the technology could be training on the actual brick and mortar implementation. So you have a fantastic use case, you have a great model, yeah, but then you have to make it happen on the ground. If you're unable to make it happen on the ground, it doesn't work. So we've seen that across the board, across the business, and I think our ability to continue to drive that is the biggest progress that you are having, because we are not, most businesses are not complex businesses. They are simple businesses. And the more you can simplify them, the more effective they become. But one of the use cases that I am, for example, very proud of is it goes beyond our business. So, for example, we have a great collaboration with Smart Dubai, and we've been driving a conversation and an effort with, the UN Global Compact, the government of Dubai, for example, and some other entities, in order to put our data together to understand better and to drive more insight to influence our communities in the right way. So one of the use cases that we are doing is about well-being, where we actually put our data of individual consumption that we only have at scale in certain cities, and get government data in an anonymized way and some other entities' data, put them on telcos and others, put them together in order to be able to actually analyze those and drive insights that can actually influence positively for example, in this case, influence positively public policy on public health. And how do we combine that with education, etc., in order to improve people's well-being and so on? But we're also developing that within our own business in order to understand you as a customer. How can we, for example, and that will happen starting next year, you go into a Carrefour, for example, and you buy whatever you buy. At the end of your journey, we tell you, you bought 12,000 calories, okay? So you didn't buy product, you bought 12,000 calories. And if you would like, you can actually get the same amount of product, the same amount of nutritional value, but with 8,000 calories by replacing this product by that product, or this thing by that thing, etc., etc. So to give people practical advice on improving their well-being, improving their health, without having to compromise on what they'd like to do, but actually exposing them to different options.
Yeah, great. No, that's very insightful. Thank you so much. So we only have unfortunately 5 minutes, so it won't be possible to address with many questions from the audience. Just looking at them. Lots of questions around privacy. So, when you think about data, obviously there's privacy. Any tips that you can give them on that. There's also a couple of other questions that were related to kind of how do you estimate, and what's the ROI of that data transformation? You know, is there a time span that you would advise? How do you gauge, you know, create benchmark for people? You know, if you wanted to start, where would you start? And then, you know, last set of questions that were really around, what did you learn that didn't work, right? So we hear, you know, a lot of the great things that you did, but is there anything that you learned in the process that could be useful for our audience, like things not to do or things that could help them avoid potentially negative steps?
Thank you. So on the privacy, I have a particular view on privacy in general, but and I totally understand the debate, and we as a company, we make sure that we are GDPR compliant wherever we operate, irrespective of the territory that we operate, because this is today the most stringent standard. I'm personally of the view, you know, data has always been there. The only difference is that data used to be on handwritten, on basically logs, okay, or a different format, and now data is just digitally available. So we did not have an issue about privacy before. You know, when your data was available and anyone could open a book and read what you have done. Now we have an issue with data because the way data is available allows a larger amount of people that could access it non-physically and basically decide what it is. And plus, because of technology, our understanding that we can derive from the data make certain stakeholders more powerful than others. And I think at the end of the day, this is there is a political dimension behind it. So I am personally, and we are as a company, totally in favor of total anonymized data. And we work on that basis. And we make sure that we are able to derive data and create personas and only work internally on the data that are individually targeted in order to actually add value to our people, but always make sure that we're very strict on that sense. But I think it's very important for the world to continue to evolve, is for all of us to be able to share data in an anonymized but meaningful way. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult. I think we've seen it in this pandemic. Our ability to share data, etc., was very important, and I'm sure we would have been able to do maybe a bit more had you been able to share more data in a better way. That's on the one side. On the other side, with regard to what worked and what did not work, I think that the one thing that doesn't work is the siloed approach to a transformation. The other thing that does not work is to think about a digital transformation in absence of an overall transformation. We have to remember that a technology and digital transformation is a mean to an end. When it becomes the end in itself, it's irrelevant. It has no purpose. And in my opinion, it does not work. And we've seen it in our cases when you just pursue technological advancement for the sake of it. The other thing is with regard to ROI. Again, I'm a bit different here. I don't think we should apply ROI to these things. You know, it's like, for me, this is very similar to running water in a building or air conditioning or Wi-Fi. So if you are today to build a hotel or an office building or a residential building, for example, would you put an ROI on having running water? Or would you put an ROI on having a cooling system or having Wi-Fi in the building? You can have the best hotel in the world today. If it doesn't have proper Wi-Fi, no one's going to come to you. No. So you could arguably say that the only thing that gets you return is the Wi-Fi. No, that's wrong. Yeah. And you could arguably say that all the rest without Wi-Fi doesn't get you anything. So you will not go to a hotel if you don't have, or an office building if you can't have internet access. No. In a wireless way, not even in a wired way. No one is willing today to plug it again and have a dial-up. So what I want to say is, I am of the view that the most important things in life are unmeasurable.
Yeah. No,
and I think this is one of them. Business leaders should go about it. Of course, they have to take into consideration financial consideration, but these are not things that you measure the way you measure other important things, because these are enablers.
No, thanks a lot, Alain, for sharing. Goes back to critical pain points. I mean, looking at the time, we unfortunately have to wrap up. There are most likely so many additional questions, but thanks again, Alain, for the great discussion with David and myself. We're pretty sure the audience enjoyed it very much, the insights you were giving, and it also, again, confirms, I think that was for me the one key takeaway: people first and people last. People first, I need the data, I need to understand them, and then people last, I need to execute. So thanks a lot for sharing all these great insights. Yeah, for the audience, just the last update here. If you want to stay connected, please feel free to stay connected on digitalinsead.edu or on our live learning platform, where you will also learn about our upcoming webinars. And yeah, feel free to sign up again to see you in the future. Again, a big thanks from David, Alain, and myself. Please stay safe and all the best. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Alain, as well.
Thank you.
Goodbye
Thank you
to everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.